Okay, so last we met, we finished up our exciting adventures in part one, Hobbes and Descartes. So the materialist, his main view is we need to build a sovereign in order to establish order to fight chaos. And then our second fellow, Descartes, his view is we need to establish certainty. So he goes on that quest of epic doubt, ending up in what he considers sort of supreme doubt, the evil demon, etc., and then hits rock bottom with I think, therefore am, and then rebuilds everything from there, or so he calls. And now we transition to moving away from Hobbes, the English person who's dead, and the dead Frenchman Descartes, to across the pond-ish, across the channel, I guess, to looking at two of the more unusual philosophers, Benedict or Baruch, Spinoza, and Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz. And so without further ado, part two. A little background for Spinoza. He was born Baruch Spinoza, or Espinoza, in Amsterdam in 1632. His being there in, the reason why it's got the Spanish name Espinoza, but is in Amsterdam is this. His parents were Portuguese Jews who fled from Spain and Portugal because those countries required that everyone either convert to Christianity or leave. And they went to Holland because Holland was religiously tolerant for the time. If you recall American history, the Pilgrims famously left England because they wanted to be religiously intolerant, went to Holland, found the Dutch too tolerant, and came to America where they could be intolerant, which continues to this day. He was regarded as a person of great potential, and his parents and grandparents hoped he'd become a rabbi. But unfortunately for them, he became a terrible disappointment because instead of a rabbi, he became a philosopher, which is the most disappointing thing you can do to your parents. My parents still think I'm a drug dealer, so this has got some. I go by the name El Filosofo, the terror of the Florida panhandles. So what happened to Spinoza? Well, he found philosophy, which is doom, and specifically he got into scholasticism and started, it was just kind of a gateway drug to Descartes. And this led him beyond the teachings of Orthodox Judaism, and he ended up changing his name from the original Baruch to Benedictus, which means the blessed in Latin. And he started questioning the immortality of the soul, the existence of angels, and of course that led to trouble. Now the Jewish community was quite worried because they'd been booted out of Spain and Portugal, they'd been subject to prosecution throughout the centuries in Europe, and of course by the Romans even before then. And so their approach was basically to avoid drawing attention and causing trouble. So they were quite worried that the tolerant Dutch would have a limit to their tolerance, and that if he kept pushing this, they would give him the boot him out. And so what they did is they first tried to bribe him and persuade him, which failed, and they ended up excommunicating him, it was actually a pretty serious excommunication. Sort of, I guess, mild excommunication is basically pack up your stuff, get out. This one actually sentenced him to damnation with a curse. So not only were they like, get out of here, but go straight to hell, do not collect $200. Or whatever, I guess it'd be like 20 gold pieces back then. There's also an assassination attempt on him. They tried to kill him. Perhaps an assassin with some sort of creed, who knows. But apparently they sent the wrong sort of assassin because they didn't kill him. So either he was pretty tough, or the assassin wasn't too good at assassinating. So what ended up happening to our good dead friend, now dead friend Spinoza? Well, even though he had the opportunity to work as a philosopher, it was actually offered the chair of philosophy at Heidelberg in 1673, but he thought that that would interfere with the peace required to think, and he was also worried it would rob him of his freedom to speak as he wanted to, because he would have to basically act properly to keep his job. So what he decided to do was, instead of being a professional philosopher, let's say making money doing it, he became a lens maker. He made lenses for microscopes and telescopes. So he'd spend his day providing lenses, or I guess that's what they called it back then, and thinking about philosophy. What ended up killing him, though, was not the assassin, but the lenses. He was grinding the glass and breathing it in, because back then they didn't have like OSHA, the Office of Safety, for not killing your workers thing. And so sucking in all that glass dust gave him tuberculosis, or made him vulnerable to tuberculosis, and he died. And of course, he's still dead today. He wrote a fair amount of stuff. 1663, Principles of Cartesian Philosophy, soon to be made in a movie starring Vin Diesel. That is not true, but it could be. Vin Diesel does play Dungeons and Dragons, so not a philosopher, but kind of a nerd. Apparently he has a tattoo of his D&D character on his leg. For real. That part is not a lie. He will roll a D20. In addition to driving fast and furious. 1670, he had the Theologico-Political Treatise, which was published anonymously, was banned by the government for defending personal liberty, but most importantly was his development of this concept, the idea of biblical criticism. Now, when it comes to religion, this is, I guess, kind of a relevant point to the philosophy of religion, is one way to look at religious texts is you read them as a believer. You take them as an article of faith, and you read them as part of the practice of your religion. There's also the more recent development, developed in part by Spinoza, where the texts are read critically as text. Instead of reading it as, yes, this is what I believe, looking at it as a work of literature or a work of history. And that did not go over super well. Although it is what distinguishes today being religious from studying religion. And since although I'm a philosopher, I'm in the philosophy and religion department, people often ask me, like, well, what's the difference? And I say, well, being religious means you believe. Studying religion means you're studying it as a subject. You can believe, but you're studying it as an academic, as a topic of study. And then you die. Not because of it, but eventually. Now, his philosophical tour de force, what he's really known for, is his ethics demonstrated in geometrical order. Because if there's anything people like more than ethics, it's geometry. Also a movie starring Vin Diesel. No, that part is also a lie. It wasn't published during his lifetime because people were worried that he would end up getting in trouble. But after he died, a friend published it for him, and it's still in print today. So what was our good dead friend Spinoza up to when he wasn't grinding his lenses? Well, one way to look at Spinoza, which is kind of an interesting model, is he offers what could be seen as kind of a self-help book, because it begins with a problem we still see today and tries to offer us advice about how to live our life. And so you can see his work as a philosophical work, but it wouldn't be too far afield to say, yeah, this is a philosophical self-help book to make your life better. So what's he up to? Well, first, in his work on ethics, he wants to present a foundation for ethics. And so you may be wondering, that's not self-help, but wait, there's more. He thinks that ethics is a way of seeing the world that leads to a way of acting that leads to freedom from human bondage. Now by this, he doesn't mean people being chained up or in bondage to other people. He doesn't mean that. What he means is this. He claims, and if you're familiar at all with Buddhism, it's kind of similar to that we are enslaved by our affections, by our passions. We are in bondage to what we love the most. And if you've ever read about Buddhism, similar sorts of deal in Buddhism. We're attached to the world of illusion, and it ties us to the wheel of rebirth. And then we suffer, we die, we're reborn, we suffer again. And in classic Buddhism, you have to get rid of all your desires, even the desire to get rid of your desires, to achieve nirvana. And so as he sees it, we're connected to all the things we love. Like if we love our car, that binds us to our car. If we love like our house or our job or other people, we're bound to them.
You said this is Buddhism?
Oh, he's not a Buddhist, but it's similar to Buddhism, at least the sort of classic Buddhism. Similar sort of problem. In classic Buddhism, the problem is that we're bound, as the Buddhists see it, we're bound to the world by our desires, by our wants. And that's bad because life is, according to Buddha, life is suffering. One of the noble truths is life is pain. And on Buddhist metaphysics, you die, but your desire keeps you attached to the world. You're reborn, you suffer, you're reborn, you suffer. And the only way to escape the wheel of pain is by giving up all your desires, even your desire to give up your desires. And then you'd be free, and you'd achieve nirvana. Not the 1990s grunge band, but the original state of no wind. Also a movie by Vin Diesel. Also not true. Yeah, Vin Diesel gets around. Now, so Spinoza is presenting kind of a similar scenario. His view is if you base your happiness on wealth, friends, fame, fortune, etc., that's a mistake. Why? Well, if a person's happiness depends on their red sports car, what can happen to their sports car? Yeah, it can crash. Or they can miss their payments on it, and it can be repossessed, taken away. And if that is their happiness, they can see their happiness being dragged away by, Carl's towing, being literally dragged out of the driveway. If they base their happiness on other people, what happens with other people?
They die.
Yeah, they die. And there goes your happiness, right in the ground. Or they leave, they betray you, they move on to other things. And so other people are attachments to them. His view is it leads to pain. So if our job is the focus of our attention, well, with today's economy, what can happen to your job?
You get laid off.
Yeah, you get laid off. Or your whole company would be wiped out. And so that leads to suffering. So his view is if we have form attachments to all these things that can die, that can betray us, that can be towed away by Carl's trucking, then we're in trouble, because we're always going to be unhappy. We're always going to be suffering. So his mission objective is this. We need to find something that will not die, will never leave us, will never betray us, and cannot be towed away by Carl's towing. Now, as he sees it, the only thing that's good or bad is how we're affected by it. So he doesn't think that good is a quality out there, or that evil is a quality out there. In a way, he's very similar to Hobbes. Hobbes' view was, crudely put, good is what makes you feel good. Bad is what makes you feel bad. Pleasure, pain. And Spinoza takes a very similar view. So what hurts us, we regard as bad. What we enjoy, we regard as good. So it's the effect. So what we need to do is this. We need to find something, since what matters is, in a sense, how we feel, we need to find something that will never again, never leave us, never die, never betray us, never hurt us. And so this is where I say it's a self-help thing, because the problem is suffering. What is the cause of our suffering? Well, we attach ourselves to things that inevitably will hurt us. We'll die, will leave, will betray us, will be taken from us. And so what we need to do is find something that will never leave us, will never die, will never betray us, will never let us down. And that, of course, is Donald Trump. No. Vin Diesel. So what is this? Well, his answer is this. God is the answer. Because God will never die, he'll never grow old, he'll never leave you, he'll never betray you, he'll never be towed away by Carl's towing, so God is always there for you. So a solution is essentially a religious answer, to base all your happiness on God. Now, one implication of this, of course, is all that other stuff, cars, boyfriends, girlfriends, husbands, wives, jobs, etc., all the other stuff will only bring you pain. So everything has to be placed on God. Which is not too, I mean, at this point you may be thinking, well, that's not really too far from standard, religion, because it's standard sort of Christianity and Islam and Judaism that God is the only one you can truly count on. Everything else dies, etc. But Spinoza takes it to a new extreme. His view is that essentially the social life is all vain and futile. So kind of a downer in some ways. Now, so how's he going to make this stuff happen? Well, again, quick recap. Problem. We're bound to things that will hurt us and betray us. Solution. Find that which will never betray you, hurt you, or die, and will never do any harm to you. What is that? God. So how do we make that happen? Well, this is what he claims. And this is where it gets philosophical. So he follows Descartes in agreeing that the structure of the universe is mathematical. We're in a mathematical world. And yeah, so math. Kind of my nemesis, math and stairs. Now he agrees with Descartes that philosophy should follow that mathematical model. So what he does is he takes it pretty seriously. Descartes, despite his love of math, fortunately, thank goodness, didn't write his stuff out, like math stuff. He wrote it out in essay form, making it more readable. But Spinoza said, hey, what people really like? They like that math stuff. So what he did is he worked through following the mathematical model, trying to demonstrate in his words ethics in geometrical order. So he essentially follows the method of Euclid, the geometry guy. And he begins with definitions, axioms, propositions, derived from the definitions and axioms, and he works through demonstrated propositions. So basically he's doing a lot of math-like stuff, because what people like more than anything is math. And he ends up with having 259 demonstrated propositions. And each one ends with QED, which is, from the Latin, quod erat demonstrandum, which translates as, which was to be demonstrated. Or, as someone else said, quite easily done. Now, there's some debate about how self-evident he thought those axioms were, but the world will never know. Now, much like Descartes, he accepts a foundational model for his philosophy. The foundation for him, though, is not, I think, therefore I am, but the foundation is this. Definitions about God. And then, what he ends up doing, to make a long story short, he begins with the definition of God, and then at the end he says, essentially that God is happiness, the path to happiness. And so that's where it ends up going. Now, what kind of assumptions does he have going on in this approach? Before going to that, anything about the stuff so far? It needs more stuff. Now, one thing he does, which at first may seem a bit odd, but turns out to be rather odd, is he claims, well, what he's going to do, I guess to give some context, to make it make more sense, he's going to essentially go from his definition of God, and trying to get from his definition of God to God exists, to God will make you happy. That's kind of his mission. And so he's taking a priori rationalist approach. So what he has to do is get from God is this, and somehow by pure definition, to get to that proves God exists. This requires him to make certain assumptions, which are as follows. Firstly, he claims to have a conception of something, let us say God, or burritos, or tacos. Oh, interestingly, apparently there's a school, a university that's adding a class on tacos, for real. I'm like, man, they didn't have such cool classes. I'd take that class. Tacos? Seriously. That'd be a good class. I mean, there are bad tacos, but it takes a lot of work to make a bad taco. Right. Even Taco Bell cannot make bad tacos. Anyway, I'm just thinking about this could have been taco philosophy. I didn't know that was an option. Paul, if I had known that was an option, This would have been taco philosophy. We just come in and make tacos. And talk about then the philosophy of the taco. Yeah, that'd be a good class. I gotta do that. So he claims that the conception of something, say a taco, is to explain what it is to be a taco. To explain something, he says, requires an account of its cause, what made it what it is. Now, this statement that he makes will seem kind of small, but will become fairly critical to his whole view, which is this. From a given determinate cause, an effect necessarily follows. What he's saying here is that there is only necessity. Cause brings about effect with no other alternatives, no other possibilities. Now, as we'll see in a bit, that shapes his entire view of how things work. By continuing along, knowing the effect requires knowing the cause. And he claims that the order and connection of ideas is the same as the order and connection of things. Again, that may seem like kind of a kind of minor sort of thing. Okay, connection of an idea is just like the connection among things. But what this entails is this. He's sort of smushing together both what we think of as like causal connections, physics, things happening in the world, and logical connections, matters of language. And one of the debates in the science and the philosophy is, does our language and logic match up with reality? Are we getting it right or not? And some philosophers say, yeah, the reality and our logic and language all mesh together, otherwise you wouldn't be able to talk about the world. But what Spinoza does is he kind of smushes them all together into kind of like a nacho or taco, or a burrito would be a better analogy. I'll kind of jam in that burrito. So, he smushes together the following three things. One, that A causes B, brings about the effect. That the concept of A contains a concept of B. And thirdly, that B cannot be thought of apart from A. So the takeaway there is that unlike many other philosophers, he's taking logic, language, and causation and making them all essentially the same. So thinking of something, having a concept of something is the same thing as A causing B. Having the concept of A leads to the concept of B, etc. So he's pushing that all together. Now, one of the reasons why is because, of course, he's trying to prove God by definition. So he's going to basically say, we have the idea of God, and this is going to prove God exists. So that's the reason why he's stuffing all that stuff into that burrito. Now, before going to his attempt to prove God, anything about setup that needs more stuff, or anything about tacos? Okay, so now we turn to his epistemology. And of course, epistemology comes from episteme, knowledge, ology, study of. It's what do you know, how can you know it, what are the limits of knowledge? Now, Spinoza is a rationalist. Going back to the ancient days of the first part of the course, rationalists are folks who believe that you can prove the existence of at least some things by pure reason, just by working out the logic or by definition, whereas the empiricists say, oh, that's BS. If you want to prove something exists, you got to have sensory evidence that it's out there. Now, Spinoza takes things even farther. And, bless you. And then, as I mentioned before, one thing that Spinoza is known for is taking logic, language, and causation, and smushing it all together. And here's where that smushing really comes into play. First part of the smush. Necessity. Now, one of the big debates in philosophy and science is the question of this. Are we free to choose, to make decisions, or are we not? And basically there are three big options here for free or not. Now, one option is we're free to some degree. That is to say, somehow and one of the problems is working out what exactly is it to be free. But we kind of go with our intuitive feelings about it, that we have some degree of freedom. We can make choices among options. I mean, I used to go with a menu analogy. You know, you get a menu, and you get the food on there. You've got burritos, tacos, chalupas, chihuahuas, all the usual foods. And if you believe that we're free, you could pick any item on the menu. It's totally, there's no, it'd be difficult to predict what you're going to take, and you can pick any of those items. You are free to eat what you will. Now, another option is called determinism. And there's a couple versions. Now, one version of determinism is what's called predeterminism. And the idea is that you're picking an item. Let's say you go with the chihuahua with extra cheese and sour cream, was set at in most cases, like at the beginning of everything. So we can use the analogy the universe is like anybody ever seen like the mousetrap game? It was not really like a game. I guess way before your time, but there was this game, you'd play it by building a mousetrap. But it'd be a really, not like a, snap, push your fingers type of thing, but it's like this elaborate device. And you'd try to like get your mouse to the finish line, and then if the trap is completed, you're trapped, you lost. And then everyone else got the cheese, I guess. But anyway, I guess with the advent of the internet, probably no more games like that. But, or we can use the analogy of a clock. If you have a clock, the idea, a better example. Has anybody seen like, they do the videos of like dominoes, doing all kinds of like, extreme dominoing? They'll go and do all kinds of things and knock things around and like flip balls in the air and all that kind of cool stuff. So thank God for YouTube. It's kind of like that. Once you move the first domino, the end of that, assuming everything goes the way it's supposed to, is set to that last piece. And so predeterminism is like that. Once the first domino moves, here's the domino where you order, and it's all predetermined. You have no freedom, and it's set from, say, the first moment of time. Now, there's also predestination, which is a specific religious concept. The idea is that you are hell-bound or heaven-bound already. Nothing you can do can change that. That's a view held by, the Calvinists, for example. There's a famous sermon by a fellow sinners in the hands of an angry God. And the view of Calvinism is that you're predestined, that your fate, hell or heaven, is already set from day one. So you're either hell-bound or heaven-bound, nothing you can do. So option 2 is determinism. You are not free. You just got either it's set by divine agency, how it all rolls out, or it's set by a material mechanical universe, like the dominoes or like a clock ticking away. Now, a third option is the random universe. It's all chance. Now, some people think that, they point to quantum theory, which is usually wrong, but they say, oh, according to quantum theory, it's all chance and random, so we're free. But the mistake they make is, of course, is that chance doesn't mean that you're free. Random is not free. What's the difference? Well, we can take the example of the menu. If we got 6 items on the menu, if you're free, that means you can pick any of the 6. It's all up to you. It's not preset, it's not predetermined, it's not predestined. You're free. If it's determinism, then you don't have a choice. It's just going to be what it's going to be. And if it's predetermined, that means that all the events leading back to the beginning of time lead to you picking that taco. If it's predestined, then God has ordained it that you're going to pick that taco. Now, if it's by chance, it's like rolling a die. It's random. It's like the die rolls and you get like a 3, so you order the chalupa. Now, in that case, you're not free. It's just random. You're not choosing. It's being chosen for you by the dice. So those are the main options. We are free, we are determined, or it's chance. And some people like to kind of mix them together. Kind of like Well, you can use the example of a modern video game where we think we have some choices. Like if you're playing like Halo 5 or Destiny or something, you can move around like in the game. But of course, the whole game itself, if you're playing a first-person shooter, is determined. You have to play that story. You can't like go off on your own story. But also there can be some chance, like the stuff that you get as rewards or something may be randomly generated. And so you could have these combined together. Some free, some determined, some chance. Typically philosophers, though, they tend to be exclusive. They'll say like either we're free to some degree or completely unfree, either by determinism or chance. So where does Spinoza fall? Well, we're not free in the sense of free will. So that's out. Although he does say that we are, well, we're not free, but God's free. We'll see what that means a bit later. So there's kind of some freedom. Chance is out for him. There's no randomness. So what he accepts is determinism. Everything that will be, well, way to put it is this. Whatever is had to be and could not have been otherwise. So, for example, the Super Bowl. We don't know who's going to win. It's going to be the Panthers or, I'm saying, the Chihuahuas. Who's? The Broncos. Broncos. I think the big winners will be the people who sell chicken wings. Those will be the big winners.
Right.
And there was worry last year because there was a shortage of chicken wings. And people were really worried. They were very worried. But fortunately, the chickens came through for us. Thank you for your sacrifice, chickens. Thank you for your service. Yeah, so we don't know how the game's going to turn out. Someone does. I'm not saying it's rigged. It's gone. So we don't know how it's going to turn out, but according to Spinoza, it's determined. It's a matter of necessity. Whatever happens in the game, whatever happens, had to happen. Could not have been otherwise. So everything you've done in your life, you couldn't do otherwise. You were enrolled in a class, couldn't have done otherwise. Whatever grade you get in the class, couldn't be otherwise. And so for Spinoza, everything is determined. And his view is that if somehow you understood how everything worked, you had a complete understanding of physics and chemistry and so forth, you would see that necessity. And what I always picture is, in The Matrix? Everybody seen The Matrix? It's an old movie, but like where Neo can see the code, the Matrix. It's kind of like that. Imagine you could see all the code of the universe and understand it completely. It'd be like being able to look at the code for like a program. If you had a complete understanding of it, there'd be no surprises. You know how everything worked. So you'd see, for example, it plays out and aha, the Panthers win. Or aha, there's President Trump. Actually, probably not now. Cruz spanked him in Iowa. So it was Cruz, Trump, Rubio, and then the other guys. And then Bernie and Hillary, the Hillary and the Byrne were pretty close. But Spinoza would say that result could have been otherwise. So Trump shouldn't be sad because he had to get second place, because he couldn't be otherwise. But of course, if Trump feels sad, he cannot feel but otherwise than sad. Now, but does it feel like there is chance? For example, who's going to win the Super Bowl? Somebody. Like I said, probably whoever sells chicken wings. I think the pizza companies should win the Super Bowl. Who's going to be president? Jeb Bush for the win. Comes out from behind, takes it out. Yeah, so we don't know. We don't know how things are going to go. Now, so he has to explain why it seems to us that there is contingency, that things, that chance seems to occur. I mean, a good example would be like, very clear example would be like a die. Someone rolls the dice, we don't know what it's going to be. Now, what Spinoza says is this. What that shows us is not that there is chance or non-determinism. He says that what that is a matter not of randomness or freedom, it's a matter of ignorance. That it appears contingent because we don't know. And it's basically a gap in our knowledge. So we think that the game, the Panthers and the Broncos could go either way. But Spinoza says it can't. There's gonna be the winner, and the winner cannot be anybody but the winner. But we don't know. We don't have the full picture. Now, things that we do see the picture of, we have no trouble with. For example, suppose you get a beaker of water at normal, at sea level, chemically pure water, blah, 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 normal pressure, and you heat it up. What's going to happen at 100 degrees centigrade? Yeah, it's not going to turn into, tapioca. It's not going to turn into a burrito. It's going to boil. It's always going to boil. And we understand that. We understand that process. And it's a matter of necessity. Now, Spinoza says the same thing about everything else in life. We just don't have a good picture. But if we could see everything, like in like that, the Matrix, see all the code, we would see everything that had happened. We'd see exactly why it happened. And we'd realize there is no contingency. So his claim is just ignorance. We just don't know how it works. Final illustration. Suppose you looked at a screen and you saw numbers coming up on the screen. Say like 1, 3, 6, 4, 2. You just kept doing that, over and over. What is the screen doing? What's being shown to you? Yeah, weird one, because it goes 1, 3, 5, 7, 8, 20, 15. Well, you probably think what? There's no pattern, so it's all probably random. So you might think, oh, it's, to do some computer stuff, it may be random 20. It's generating a random number. And that would be one explanation. But if you could look at the code, you might just see a list of numbers. There's no chance. It is just putting those numbers up. So what looks like chance is not chance at all. And so his claim is, it's merely our ignorance that makes us think that it is chance. But if we could see all the stuff, see all the things, we would know there is no chance. Or so he claims. Now, one reason for that is, to bring up a religious reason why you'd want something like that, would be the notion of God's omniscience. How does God know the future? And one possibility is that God sees all the code. So he knows exactly how everything is going to go because he has a perfect understanding. He knows what is going to occur. And we don't have as much knowledge, so we're surprised. It's not that it's random, it's just that we don't know. And if we did, we would know how everything was going to go. So is he right about that? If we understood, because the idea of having freedom and chance would be that even if you knew everything, you still could be wrong, because the person could choose something else. Or if it's chance, you would know like the table to roll on, like the menu, but you would not know the roll. So, which is what? Are we free? Do we want to be free?
Yes.
Is there really a chance? Maybe. Or is it deterministic? Maybe. Now, from our experience, our standpoint of our experience, it's like that screen flashing numbers at us. We don't know if there's just a list of numbers, and the program is just print, just lines, print 17, print 15, print 32, print 12, print 3, print 5, and it's all preset. Or if it's actually a random number, because we can't get into the code. Spinoza says if we could get into the code, so to speak, we would see that it is not random, it's all set. But the problem is that we can't really completely see into the matrix, so to speak. Now, this ties into his view of our ideas. And he claims all our ideas fit into three categories: the most inadequate and confused to the highest possible level. And these include opinion, opinion and imagination, reason, and intuition. Now, the first one, the most dim one, would be opinion and imagination. These ideas are, well, stuff we get from vague experience, from reading stuff, and he thinks that this is, well, a good example is this. How do we get the idea of cat or chihuahua? Yeah, you see cat, someone says cat. You see another cat, someone says cat. Go on YouTube, cat videos. And so, repeated experience of cats gives us a category of cat. Now, he claims that these experiences are, physiological, mechanical, and they don't give us a proper logical understanding. In other words, we're just getting the surface of things, and we see cat, concept of cat, or duck, goose, concept of duck and goose. And so our opinions and imagination just give us the surface. To go with my analogy, it'd be like the computer screen. You see the numbers appear there, and you start making guesses. Okay, the numbers, there's no pattern, so it's random. Or you may think, well, maybe it's just a real long list, or something else. Or maybe it's connected to something. So the most ignorant of ideas are opinion and imagination. Next step up is reason. Now, this is to perceive things as they really are, but not really perceive with the eyes, but perceive with, of course, reason. And he's borrowing here from Plato. Plato famously had like some of the other philosophy classes, he famously had the loft. The lowest level was dealing with the imagination, the faculty of making stuff up. Then there's faculty of belief, and then of course there are the upper level forms. Roughly put, math, logic, and then intuition. And so Spinoza is basically stealing Plato's line. That's cool because Plato's dead, so we won't miss it. Now the highest level for him is the level of intuition, which is, well, this is the most, sort of ironically, it's supposed to be the most certain of categories in terms of what we know, but it's the most fuzziest in terms of explanation. I mean, because we know what this is. Okay, opinion is what we form from observing stuff. Imagination, we're just imagining things. Reason is, well, math, logic, all that stuff. And then intuition is supposed to be, going back to Plato, just seeing the truth, being illuminated, enlightened. And going back to Plato and before, it's been the most, ironically, the most unclear and fuzzy and obscure of the concepts, where you just see the truth. Because at least with the reason, we can lay out, the proof, we can lay out the logic. But intuition is seeing and perceiving the truth in some special way. As you might imagine, some people call BS on this. But these go, again, this is a well-established tradition going back to Plato. Belief and imagination being the weakest, reason, going through all the logical steps, pretty good, and then just seeing the truth. Now, Spinoza claims that we get all three of these. Some things are just opinion, we observe. Some things work out with reason, logic, mathematics, and some truths, of course his truths that he bases his stuff on, are perceived by intuition. Now, the biggest practical challenge, of course, is how do you know when you're intuiting and when you're having a psychotic episode? It's kind of like when people hear voices in their head telling them stuff. How do you know if you're crazy or inspired? Whether you're Socrates. Socrates claimed to have a voice in his head that told him, warned him about things to do and not do. And then, of course, so did the son of Sam, claimed to have a voice in his head telling him to do stuff. Okay, so before pressing on, anything about this that needs more stuff? Okay, so what we got for Spinoza so far is this. Everything that occurs must occur. Things cannot be otherwise. So if you put a bunch of money on the Super Bowl and you lose, you can rest assured that that's the way it had to be. It could not have been otherwise. You still lose the money, but that's the way it goes. Why do things appear contingent to us? Well, basically because of ideas. We have ideas that aren't, complete, that are kind of muddled and inaccurate and, missing pieces. And so we think that things are contingent, but that's merely our ignorance. We don't know. So the Super Bowl is going to turn out the way it turns out, but we lack the capacity to predict it accurately. And people do, of course, try to predict it. There's all these models, betting models, etc. Fantasy football, and basically is an attempt to model actual games and so forth. But we don't have a good enough model to know for sure how things are going to turn out. So we think it's contingent. But Spinoza says, nope. So how do we get from all this to God? Well, Spinoza, of course, being a rationalist, he's going to go from idea of God, concept of God, kind of like Descartes did, to God. He's going to try to prove God by pure thinking. You don't have to go out and run experiments, etc. You're just going to do it by pure reasoning. So, how does it make it happen? Well, here's how it happens. He begins with a definition. And if there's anything that people like more than math, it's definitions, especially definitions about math. Now, he defines the term substance. Now, I was throwing the term substance around, quite a bit earlier, but we'll be a little more precise now. In my previous one, again, using my standard example, the sort of classic thinkers, their view is, okay, when we encounter stuff, we always encounter like coherent things. So we encounter like a folder, that's reddish, plastic, rectangular. But we never encounter like rectangle just drifting along on its own, just bumping into people. We don't encounter we encounter red things, but we don't encounter red just hanging out on its own. We encounter things that have mass, but we don't just encounter mass. And so what philosophers said is, well, there's got to be this mysterious stuff, this substance that holds it all together. It's if you were somehow able to tear away all the properties, like the red, the rectangular, etc., you'd be left with a substance, whatever that is. Now, the older definition of substance, which gets misused a lot, is this. It's something that is capable of independent existence, capable of existing on its own, not being dependent on other things. Now, people like Descartes and Aristotle, they would start with that definition. It's something that can exist on its own, but then they would get kind of sloppy with it. Because, strictly speaking, if you go with the sort of hardcore definition, it's something that can exist on its own, independent of everything else. Now, in the case of like the folder, the idea, of course, is, well, can the folder exist without like the desk? And the answer is, yeah. In contrast, can I have a handful of red? I don't mean red stuff, but just a handful of red. No, so the red can't exist on its own. So red is not a substance. But whatever it is that the red is attached to would be a substance. But Spinoza said, hey, Aristotle, Descartes, you dead guys, you are misusing your own definition. Because the strict definition is a substance can exist on its own, independent of everything else. Now what that entails, at least as Spinoza sees it, is that a substance has got to be infinite. Why? Well, here's his argument. If a substance were finite, then we can draw an actual size. That means there must be something outside of the substance defining its limits. Defining, so in the case of, let's say this is our substance. We'll call it Escobar. The substance, or El Substante. And what I hope is Spanish, but probably not. So Escobar is defined by the boundaries, namely everything that is not Escobar. Now Spinoza would say this: if something has got limits, it's not self-sufficient. It's not logically independent. It depends on other stuff. So to be this is dependent on everything that is not that. So in this sense, Escobar is not a substance because Escobar depends on everything else. Because to be Escobar requires all the stuff that is not Escobar. So he's not a substance. Or so Spinoza claims. Now Aristotle and Descartes were, again, they took the view, they kind of short out, okay, it's something that exists on its own, and then they quickly get kind of sloppy to the point where for like Descartes, I'm a substance, you're a substance, my body's a substance, my mind's a substance, and so Descartes, Spinoza says Descartes just being totally sloppy, he's getting that substance like all over the place. That's just too messy. So, for Spinoza, the substance got to be independent of everything. So there must be nothing else. So a substance, I can't draw it, of course, it's got to be, well, I can do it with arrows. So imagine, if you will, this is something infinite in all directions and all dimensions. And that, for Spinoza, would be a substance because it doesn't depend on anything else. It is.
Sorry, what if you just erase the circle around Escobar? Would that mean that's just a substance?
Yeah, because then Escobar would be everything. It would all be Escobar. Yeah, so if I just got rid of the, if I said, this is Escobar, and then I get rid of the circle and said, everything is Escobar, then Spinoza would say, okay, yeah, that's a substance. It's got to be infinite, or so he claims. Just because he's Spinoza and he's dead doesn't mean he's right. That's what he claimed. So, substance has got to be infinite. Now, that part, of course, not well accepted. Again, like Descartes and Aristotle, they took substances to be like finite stuff. Because Descartes knew, I'm a substance, you're a substance, and everybody's a substance. And Dr. Pepper's a substance, too. But then he brings in God. And then, of course, that's probably a more appealing approach because, well, how big is God? Traditional view. 6'1", 6'2"? He's supposed to be, infinite. Infinitely big. So, accepting, God as being infinite, generally, people who believe in God will generally accept that. God has no limits or boundaries. He is infinite. And so he takes God to be absolutely infinite. Not just infinite, but absolutely infinite. Now here's something weird. Anybody who's done math class, some of the upper level math classes already know this, but there are different size infinities. Some infinities are bigger than others, which seems kind of weird because infinity is as big as something can be. So how could you have a bigger infinity? And here's how. Now, of course, we have numbers, say the real numbers. And then, of course, we have well, we did an example. Odd numbers. How many odd numbers are there? Infinite. How many even numbers are there? Infinite. So if you combine them together, You have double infinity. Yeah, because we have different sets of numbers. We have, the real numbers, the irrational numbers, the rational numbers, prime numbers, etc. But there's an infinite number of all of them. And so there have to be different sizes of infinity. There has to be bigger and smaller infinity. This leads someone to say, mathematicians, that's just BS. You're just playing with words. They say, no, we're playing with numbers. Entirely different. But that's what they claim. There's different kinds of infinity. And some say that's BS, and some say it's math. And some they say it's math BS. So how does this prove God's existence? Well, if we accept that a substance is going to be infinite, or we accept, if we think that's not so appealing, if we do accept that God is a substance and is infinite, then what he needs is basically the infinity thing. And he thinks that from God being infinite, this proves God exists. So how does that work? Well, this is what he does. He takes God to be, again, substance, infinite, and this is where he gets into trouble. You may wonder, why did they excommunicate him? The only reason is this. It's not for saying there's God, but because he claims there is only one substance. Now, at first, people are probably like, oh, there's one God. That's cool. You're cool, Spinoza. You're a monotheist just like us. That's fine. Then he says, no, there's just one substance. And people were probably like, what? There's just one substance? And he's like, yeah, there's just one thing, and it's God. They're like, hey, that's heresy. So how do we get to heresy and God's existence? Well, here's how it goes. Now, one argument is this, and this will be kind of tedious, but here's how it goes. He says a substance is that which is in itself, is conceived through itself, and the conception of which does not need the conception of another thing from which it must be. As to say, substances are totally self-contained, self-supported. They don't need anybody else. So, if a substance has a cause, then to understand a substance, we would have to have knowledge of its cause. The second part contradicts Spinoza's definition of substance, therefore a substance cannot have a cause. According to Spinoza's definition of God, God is a substance. So since God is not of a cause, God must necessarily exist. So how can that be hammered out to something that makes kind of more sense? Well, crudely put, here's basically what he's arguing. So we got God, and God is a substance. Substance can't depend on anything else. So what creates substances? Well, if you're totally independent, who pays your bills? You do. So if substance is totally independent of everything else, it is not created, it just is. It's not created by anything else. So since they can't be caused, it's got to exist. Which is kind of a weird argument, because you thought in terms of bills, it's like you're financially independent. That means no one else pays your bills, so your bills are well paid. Kind of. Yeah, indeed. Indeed, as do I. So since the substance has to be, self-supporting, so to speak, then it must exist, because it can't be caused. Now, someone might say, that's BS Spinoza, because we could say, yeah, substances can be caused, but are not caused, but that doesn't mean that they exist. Going back to thinking about, yeah, true, if you're financially independent, you can pay your bills, but it doesn't mean your bills are paid. You got to first establish that you're financially independent, and that you're paying your bills, and then your bills are paid. You just can't go from one to the other. Now, his second argument for God, there being one substance, is actually pretty clever. Here's how it goes. Now, it's actually a reductio ad absurdum argument. As what he's going to do is assume what he wants to disprove show how that leads to an impossibility or something absurd, and then conclude that what was assumed is wrong. So he's going to try to say, imagine if there were two substances. Let's see where this goes. So let's imagine two substances. I need to name them. Substance one, what do we call that?
Tom,
Tom. Substance two?
Jerry.
Jerry. Well done. So you got Tom and Jerry. Now, his claim is, of course, that if there are two substances, they're either the same or they're different. Now, is that true? If you have two things, are they the same? Are they either the same or different?
Yeah.
Yeah. So far so good. Now, if they were the same, if Tom was identical to Jerry, he claims that couldn't be. You can't have Tom identical to Jerry and have both Tom and Jerry. Because if you have two things that are the same, they're actually one, not two. Here's another example. Think of Superman and Clark Kent. They're the same, but they're also, yeah, well, they're different names, but they're the same person. You know? So it would be true if you have Superman and Clark Kent, they are identical, and there really is, people don't know it, but there really is only one person, namely Super Kent. Super Clark, or Kal-El, I guess that's the proper reference to it. Yeah, I know my new stuff. Now, so you can't have two identical substances because they would be the same. Now, some philosophers would disagree with that. They would say you could have two identical things somehow. The question is, how? And they would say, you can't, trust me. So the option of being identical is out. So second option, we have two substances and they're not identical. Well, could that work? Well, if we were dealing with, two objects, sure, that'd be no problem. You could have two things. Tom and Jerry, one's a cat, one's a mouse. They're not the same, no problem. Where the problem comes in is if we go with his definition of substance, namely, these have to be, they both have to be infinite. So why is that a problem? Well, here's why it becomes a problem. If you have one, let's say Tom is infinite. He has every attribute to perfection. So he has, let's use a simple case. Suppose there's three qualities, A, B, and C. And he's got them all to infinity. Now, if Jerry's infinite, then if he's got all attributes and they're all infinite, that would mean they're actually the same, which takes us back to our first problem, which can't work. So if Jerry is not the same as Tom, and Tom is infinite in everything, Jerry has to be less than this, has to be less than something. So Jerry could have like A and B, or C to lesser degrees. Now, at this point, I think, oh, okay, that's okay. You got Tom, infinitely A, B, and C. You got Jerry, who's lesser A, B, and C. But then, of course, we're on the problem that substance is supposed to be infinite, so a problem there. There's even another problem, if that wasn't enough problems. If Jerry exists, Tom is missing stuff. Because whatever Jerry's got, however small, is something Tom doesn't have. So to use an analogy, suppose Jerry's got a penny. And can Tom have all the money in the world or the universe?
No.
No, because even if Jerry has one penny, Tom could have everything else, but he still doesn't have all the money, because Jerry's still got that penny. So if Jerry exists, that means that Tom is missing whatever Jerry's got. So even if Jerry hasn't got much, it's enough to make Tom incomplete. So if Spinoza is right, substances are infinite, blah, 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 and God is infinite, then there can't be anything but God. Because anything else that exists would be something that God is lacking. He'd be missing pieces. He wouldn't be God.
Okay, so who was, sorry, I didn't catch the name, who countered the argument saying, who countered Spinoza's argument?
Oh, lots of people.
Okay.
But yeah, one argument's the existence being property. People like Kant argued against that, and then there are a lot of people argue. We're not looking at anybody in particular, but a lot of people argued against this conception of substance, because although it is, if you do buy the definitions, it all does lead to where it's going. Because logic is kind of hard to fault. Yeah, so we've got that problem. So if we get God being infinite, then there can't be anything but God. And the logic's pretty solid because it does seem to work. If you go with the analogy of the money thing, if one person has all the money in the world, that means no one else has any money. And if someone's got money, even a penny, a little shiny penny they're holding, that means that the richest person, maybe the richest person, but they don't have that penny. Now, so what this leads to, according to Spinoza, is this. There is no Jerry. Sorry, Jerry. There is only Tom. Because if there was anything other than Tom, Tom would not be infinite. So if we switch this back to God, if there's anything other than God, God would be lacking. So to the degree that we exist, God would be imperfect. Now, there's a couple ways to apply this. One way is to, accept that God is not infinite in the sense of containing everything. So you can have like a God who's, going with the analogy, you might say, okay, the richest person in the world who has billions and billions, they don't have all the money, but is that still pretty rich? Yeah, you would say, oh, that poor person, he has all the money except for one penny. How sad. Likewise, you might say, well, maybe God doesn't have everything, but he's got, this is what we got, and God has got everything but that. So you might say, yeah, that's still pretty God-like. But where the problem comes in, again, is what my advisor used to call the God of the philosophers. Not the God people talk about like in church, but the God that is to be, truly infinite. And so it does seem to work, that if you buy all those assumptions, God is to be infinite, and so there can be nothing but God. So why the trouble? Well, here's why. This view that it's all God is what's called pantheism. Now, it's a form of monotheism. And monotheism is what? If you're a monotheist, how many gods do you believe in?
One.
Yeah, you just get one. And if you're a polytheist, you believe in two or more. And pantheism is a view that there's one God, but God is a pan pizza. No. It's kind of like pansexual, someone who only gets involved romantically with pan pizzas. That's the definition. I assume that's what that means. That's what pan pizzas are for, right? That's why I never order them, because I don't know what people have been doing to them. Pansexuals commit, pansex into those pan pizzas. You don't want that. You don't want someone's sloppy pizza. Well, anyways, it's a family quiz, so we can't talk about that. Yeah, so a pantheist believes that it's all God. Now, it's not that I'm God and you're God and we're all gods. It's that it's all God. So the desk is, to use an analogy, kind of a bad analogy, it's kind of like, think of if your body was everything. The cells that make you up are part of you, then we are, going with that analogy, we're like a cell in God's body. So all the little bits, tables and chairs, Donald Trump, Tom and Jerry, the earth, the sun, the moon, etc., we're all part of God. We're components of God. It's all God. We're not within them, not like like a burrito in your tummy. We are composing him, like a cell in the body or a brick in the wall. So everything is God. And that got him in trouble because pantheism is heresy. Because the traditional model, if you're a traditional Christian, Muslim, or Jewish, that is, you got God, you got the world, you got people, God creates the world, the people, that's, monotheism 101. But Spinoza's view is, it's all God. That's just all there is. And that's considered a major heresy. They used to burn people for this. Now they just give them kind of that look. Seriously? Pantheism? Which is quite an advancement, because the dirty looks hurt less than being burned alive. Now, he also got in trouble, we'll close with this, is that traditional theology, the God of the Bible and the Quran, is like a person. They talk about God thinking, God loving, God caring, God planning, God choosing, God punishing, God rewarding. But Spinoza claims that talking about intellect or will is not talking about God, that God is not a person. So then, why do people think God is a person? Well, Spinoza says this. He says, everyone's heard the thing to say that God created us in his image.
Mm-hmm.
Spinoza's view is that we see God in our image, that we have a psychological need to see God as being like us. And he said that if you could talk to like triangles or circles, they would say that God is a circle or a triangle. This is not actually original to Spinoza. There was a Greek philosopher who said, if dogs had a god, their god would be a dog. And if cats had a god, their god would be a cat. And so he says we all attribute to God our qualities, even though we're totally wrong about that. So God is everything, and God is not a person. In part because he transcends personhood. It doesn't even make sense. So gets in trouble for both of those things: pantheism and denial of God being a person. And so they sent an assassin to kill him. But they failed. Okay, so that brings us to the end of Spinoza for today. Next time we'll talk about more Spinoza, and hopefully for Valentine's Day, if you have a bad Valentine's Day, Spinoza actually has a way to make you feel better. It's not chocolate, although that helps a lot, but it's philosophical chocolate. Not as good as real chocolate. Of course, the day after Valentine's Day is actually the best holiday, because that's half-price chocolate day. The best day ever.